When humans started reaching out into the stars, everyone that saw their movements believed that humanity would be stopped or at least delayed, as they would be facing the same troubles as all other species. All other species need to look for another planet that is similar to their home planet, and for humans that is what they call an M-class planet, and only these they can settle on. What all other species fail to realize is that humanity had already gone through these trials, and that other species did not actually have to face beforehand. Normally, a species need not cultivate on a large scale, that is until they're forced to do so by running out of suitable planets to survive on, and they have more population to feed. Humans have been forced to survive in areas where their planet is actually lethal to them. Some areas with absolutely no dihydrogen monoxide, humans require this to survive, and without it, they perish in 30 to 40 standard hours. Yet humans have survived in such areas for centuries. Some areas are so cold that humans should freeze solid in a matter of minutes. Yet humans seem to be able to thrive in these areas of this planet to the point that they have become the dominant species over the landscape and its very, very dangerous fauna. Some areas of their own planet have so many toxic flora that seem to reach out along with dangerous and poisonous fauna, all of which that are lethal to humans. Everyone looked and realized that only a fully grown reptilian lax would even try to survive in this area. Yet humans have also lived in these areas and even thrived in them for such a long time, and even to this point they explore said areas for recreation. This is why the humans did not explore beyond their sector for so long. They had no reason to reach out for an M-class planet. And yet they only had one in their home system, and that was their home planet. And instead of searching, they terraformed the surrounding astral bodies. Failing that, they built massive space stations to live on. Normally, at this part of a species reaching out amongst the stars, there's a battle over resources between the two largest factions that the species have. Other species use this to test out new weapons and usually wipe out a large portion of their species if they don't wipe themselves out entirely. It is extremely rare for any species to even try to return to a pre-combat stability. The animosity between different groups would incite another conflict that would usually end the species if the species wasn't ended the first time. The humans, as it turned out, already completed this step long before they stepped out into the void. They had been killing each other for centuries before they left their cradle world, creating weapons so deadly that they thought using them against a population would bring the ire and vengeance of the other humans, and this, if nothing else, would lead to their destruction. Yet even in space, they still do arm themselves. However, that is just to assume that the strongest do not force everyone else under their thumb, and in that case force regression. It is noted that species and civilizations that do not allow anyone to be better in any way to their leaders find out that they have just lost their best minds and best bodies. The mental and physical regression sends entire civilizations and species back to an early age, much of them never to extend again until someone reaches out to pull them out of their stupor. For those species that have reached out into space and survived all the battles, all the wars that would take place fighting over resources, then the species has passed all its trials except for one. Whether by chance or by choice, this new species ends up facing one of the older species out there. This young species usually will end up fighting against their preconceived invaders. Much of the populations will be lost before one species becomes the property of the other, yet it is not known which way it will go. The humans dealt with this threat by using something no one expected: respect. Instead of attacking those that arrived at their new colony world on Proxima 7, the humans actually reached out with hails on every single frequency to contact the species that was landing on the far side called the Jarwin, and actually offered to talk with them over a meal. The Jarwin, of course, believed this was going to be a trick, a trap of some sorts, to get their secrets out of them. Their best soldiers were actually waiting outside of the room where they met with the humans, waiting for the slightest sign of aggression, a sign that never came. Even though the human colony was freshly established, they actually shared their rations with the Jarwin. Many of the Jarwin were actually just delighted to eat fresh fruits for a change, fresh fruits and vegetables. Since they are actually strict herbivores, they fell in love with the idea of commerce with the humans, commerce for more and more of these delicious goods. Even so, the Jarwin were still a bit wary and asked the humans to actually vacate the planet. When they do so, they're expected to leave everything behind. Those that expected the humans to out and out refuse, meaning there would be a battle and they could simply take whatever the humans have, were surprised when the humans simply offered to share. Not only share their food, but share the planet. With polite language, the humans offered to split the planet right down the middle, allowing for not just the availability of resources, but stopping the loss of resources in a prolonged engagement, and also allowing for trade. And trade with humans would turn out to be the best any species could hope for. Not only did the Jarwin get to enjoy the fruits of their labor, but the fruits of the humans produced as well. Yet the greatest asset they received was the fact that the humans found the tall, and by that 5 meters tall and very thin, Jarwin to be fun to interact with. Though the Jarwin were a little taken back by the number of human games that meant that if you lost, you would lose an article of clothing. They didn't quite understand, but they're not shy. Along with that, they actually got a hold of human holographic games that the Jarwin found to be just as addicting as human food. It was a wonderful time, and that's when the Saw stumbled across the Jarwin colony. The Saw, like so many other complete idiots in the universe, believe in a sort of manifest destiny. This made them attack the Jarwin and take the survivors as slaves. When the humans found out about this, they attempted to negotiate with the Saw. The Saw noticed the technology of humans and decided not to fight in the void, but to land forces on Proxima 7, now fully terraformed into an agroplanet, and they would simply take everything and everyone. The Saw, being very similar to humans, found out it was very easy to traverse the areas, weaving through trees, going across large fields. Every once in a while have to deal with a fence, but that wasn't much. The only issue they had was getting caught every once in a while with their horns, but they didn't mind too much, as the clearing air made their tails sway back to back with joy just from the thought of a deep breath that was not recycled air. The joy over taking such a jewel was something they could not stay away from. As they crossed the area with their weapons ready, the red, green, and purple bodies of the Saw enjoyed the warm air against their skin. Unlike other battles, this would actually be pleasant to deal with. They decided to strike the Jarwin first, as they believed it would be easier to take over a foe they already know and make it very quick. And they were going to be content with their prize. They knew it because of everything that was there, everything they would take. And they did try to take everything. That is, until a human male walked out of a domicile, seemingly not knowing what was going on, and he looked over and he saw the Saw multiples of them, trying to hold down the multiple limbs of a young Jarwin female. The saw seeming to laugh at the idea of what they were about to enjoy. It seemed as though the humans suddenly found the translation, and they may have thought it was going to be fun, that is, until they heard a small explosion, followed by another and another in rapid succession. Saw marauders ran to the noise to find their brethren bleeding on the ground, most of them not moving. Then they see what hit them. They look over and see a two-armed biped walking with an absolute dead look on his face. Absolutely no emotion as he walked right at all the saw looking at him. They were thinking, was this a human? In that moment, the only sound was a magazine striking the pavement, intertwined with the sound of another one being clicked into place. When the snap of the slide went forward, chambering another round, it made the saw very, very nervous. The human walked calmly to the young female Jarwin as she ran right past him towards her own domicile, screaming and crying in an absolute panic. He simply turned his head slightly and slightly moved his eyes, realizing exactly what was about to happen. The human never lowered his arms, and with each sound of the controlled explosion, another saw was seen with blood spraying out, screaming in pain, or simply dropped with a satisfying thud. The saw did, in fact, fire back with their pulse weapon, many of them striking true, and they watched as the human started to flinch and stumble. Then, as they simply paused to see the human fall, the human steadied his feet, stood up and said, "That stings," before firing the last bullet in the magazine and then reloading as the magazine tumbled to the ground. Seeing this, the saw, not being completely stupid, immediately ran back to their shuttles, all the while hearing projectiles fly past and every once in a while strike another one of their parties, watching them go down as this projectile ripped into their bodies, making them fall forward and usually laying on the ground, wincing in pain. By the time they got to their shuttles, the shooting had stopped. Either the human was out of range or out of bullets, but they didn't want to try their luck. By the time the shuttles got to space to link up with their transport ship, the human corvettes, frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and even a battleship had arrived, all surrounding them, blocking their path. The humans moved their turrets, locking their weapons onto the 4 saw transport ships. The saw could hear over their comms, "Attention saw forces. You may look like demons to us, but unless you want to see how real demons fight, power down and prepare to be boarded." Realizing how fast the humans had arrived and with so many ships, the saw immediately surrendered at that point. Though the saw would need to pay excessive amounts of reparations due to the invasion on not 1 but 2 planets, it was preferable to facing an entire human fleet. It would not be until years later that the saw discovered that had the humans not intervened, the Jarwin would have fallen to their might, though they would have lost about 20% if victory was achieved. Yet, as it turns out, the humans were there, and what showed up on Joseph 7 was barely a fraction of their true fleet. While settling their debt, the saw decided to take a page from the humans' way of diplomacy and showed absolute respect. A respect that was born out of fear, to be sure. But a few decades later, when the hive species known as the Formu attacked the saw with such force that the saw believed that their species was absolutely doomed, the humans simply asked the saw, "Do you need help?" To their shock, when they said yes, the Jarwin also arrived to help where they could. Most of the Jarwin would simply bring medical supplies, food, and provide transport to get any of those who weren't able to fight off-world, and any of this help was appreciated. The Saw at that point were barely holding on to any semblance of a defense line on their secondary planet and were absolutely shocked as they're holding the line, trying to patch up any wounds as all the artillery and shots are coming through, and then they see fully armored humans simply running up from behind, jumping over their trench lines, and continue to advance as human aircraft screamed overhead, dropping explosives that blew entire massive holes, made huge funnel clouds of fire. Some of them sprayed some sort of strange liquid that burned everything up. The Formu simply screeched in pain or simply evaporated in the entire cacophony of concussions that came down. As the humans advanced, the craft simply turned away and the artillery made the terrain in front of the humans, approximately 500 feet as they advanced, simply disintegrate. Seeing the humans advance without fear or hesitation, heading into the very face of death itself, scared the Saw to their core, thinking, it's a good thing we didn't actually pick a fight with them. Then they found something out. The duality of humans, as medics began to arrive in droves and get the injured out, and showing the concerns humans truly have for their allies. From that battle forward, the war against the Formu swarm saw the swarm being forced back. From there, a new phrase entered the Saw vocabulary, a phrase that they took inspiration from the Jarwin. It is always better to make friends with the humans, as the humans will always protect their friends. Because if you are not their friend, you might end up as their enemy. And humans have no enemies, because they kill them all. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me on today's short story. Before I go, I need to send some special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, The Black Trapper, MTF Guard, Brian Kemp, SS Demon, Chris Dixon, and Cause Lynn. Thank you all for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.